All right. Well, I will get us started. You are watching Tour Carnival's Public Policy, and here on this show we talk about Collierville, Tennessee, and some of the inner workings. We talk a lot about economic development with John Duncan, the town economic development director. He's got an interesting quote in his name this week. We'll talk about that, and we have a special guest with us as well. Molly Mehner, which is the Carville new-ish Carville town administrator. So she runs the show, and we'll be talking to Molly a little bit. But we talk all about Carville. Carville is a town just outside of Memphis, Tennessee. It's about just over 150 years old, but really in the last, maybe 20, 25 years, experiencing a lot of growth, and this growth is continuing. A lot of growth in education, in economic development, a lot of businesses coming to town, and doing this while trying to hang on to this sense of small town community that the town has with this wonderful kind of old town Rockwellian town square, I would say, and just a strong community that's growing into which we don't like to say it. If Maureen was with us, Maureen Frazier, Vice Mayor, is usually with us, but she would hate it when I say this. But we're kind of growing into a city, even though that everyone likes to call it a town. But the infrastructure is there, more akin to a city. So, welcome, Molly and John, and Molly. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. And, we talk about Collierville being 150 years old. And I want to take a quick shout out to a sponsor that we have this week, which is the First National Bank and Trust. And these guys almost have been around as long as Carterville. So I think like 100 and let me look. So 1886. So they're in the bank's 137th year, started in Arkansas, but this is a bank that's been around for a long time. They've had somewhat of a presence in Carterville, but is opening up a new branch. And they talk about being 137 years old, talk about going through things like the depression and all of that, and they've been just a rock solid bank that has always been open, never closed, where people couldn't get their money out of the bank, even going through all these highs and lows. And I know with banking being all in the news, that's a consideration now, but these guys are coming to Carville. We talk economic development. From an economic development standpoint, we talk about what's coming where. And so if you've been wondering what's coming by Home Depot, one of the things is the First National Bank and Trust. Do a lot of local support. We'll be getting into that over the next couple of weeks. But their grand opening for this location is here in about a week or two. And one of the coolest things that they're doing is a 5% on a 12-month CD, a 5% APY on a 12-month CD. I know people whose 401k in the market is not getting 5% right now. I mean, that's a phenomenal rate to be doing 5% on a CD. So just take my money, so we're glad that these guys are coming in, and we like to see that that investment into Carville, especially someone who's regional, been around a long time. So a solid addition that's coming to the town, right, guys?
Absolutely.
No doubt. And not only is that a great long-standing brand, like you said, Keith, but one of the tenants, I think there's 3 tenants in that building that they developed. Another strong brand locally, regionally, and nationally, Le Bonheur has a facility there as well. So it's a great location. They did a great job with the structure and the landscaping. And that little zone of town continues to bubble up right across the street from Malco. There's some plans for some development to go kind of across the street and catty corner from where the new bank is located. So some great activity. We all know Bill Samich over the years, who's been in this market for a long time. So happy to have him there. It's a nice addition for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit more about them over the weeks to come. So stay tuned as we kind of go through, and we'll talk more about that bank. But like you said, a good company coming there beside Le Bonheur, and that area of town just kind of growing as well. So I want to start us off. So, ladies first, and senior official first, right? So, Molly, how you doing? How you liking Collierville?
I absolutely love Collierville. I started with the town last November, and it's been nothing but fabulous. Great community, great people. Everyone has been so welcoming and friendly everywhere I go. And the town has an amazing team that has gone out of their way to make sure that I'm up to speed on everything, and helped through the budget that we're now just wrapping up. So I couldn't be happier. Very blessed to be here.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad that you're liking it, and that our citizens are behaving and treating you well. So that's good. You mentioned it coming, into Carville, and we have a perspective here. I'm from the South. I'm from this area, and kind of Carville is natural to me. I've been here so long, since 1993. I've been in the Memphis area. John's been here for a long time. And we travel around. John and I travel around, and we look at other cities, other towns. And John talks about benchmarking a lot, looking at Carville and then looking at maybe 4 or 5 other different towns that are similar in population and maybe similar and close to a metropolitan area. And we do kind of this benchmarking to see not only how Carville is doing compared to other towns, but what they might be doing that we might be interested in, kind of take the best of each one of those and build that in. You bring a little bit of an outside perspective because you worked for a town previously before you came to Carville, and you're not from this area. How do you think Carville benchmarks, and what do you think are some of the towns that Carville maybe should benchmark against?
I think Collierville benchmarked extremely well. In fact, I like to think that, we're one of the communities setting the standard. I worked for communities in Illinois, Arizona, Missouri, and now Tennessee. And quite frankly, I wouldn't have applied for the position here if I weren't impressed by what's been happening here. And that's a testament to the leadership that's come before me, the mayor and board of aldermen that are in place now and that have come before us to ensure that Collierville has developed in a manner that is setting the standard. So the first time I came to Collierville, I knew this is where I wanted to be, because things are done the right way. And when I mean that, especially related to development, it's been done thoughtfully, deliberately, strategically, and it shows. You notice it immediately upon arrival. And so I think that's absolutely critical, and I want to make sure that we maintain that over time. I think some of the communities that we look at in our region, obviously, Franklin, Brentwood are comparable communities that we look to. But again, I think we have to keep in mind that we're a unique community, and so we're never going to be exactly like anyone else. But I like what you said about borrowing best practices from other communities and making sure that we're doing all the right things, and so those are 2 I know for sure that we're looking to.
Gotcha. Yeah, and those come up in conversations, and Franklin especially, because it's close and everybody kind of knows Franklin and knows what's happening with the Nashville boom right around that area. But it's good to hear. It's kind of refreshing to hear that you've worked for other cities and that you come in and that and see that Carville is doing it right and has an infrastructure that is in place that you feel like is good and comparable. It's hard sometimes, when you're looking from the inside out constantly, and we see and on social media, of course, there's a lot of people talking about, I'll say it as room for improvement in Carville. That is the way people are talking, and people are more vocal about that than others. But it's interesting, and it's refreshing to hear from an outside in that, yes, a lot of the people that are here that have the ability to kind of complain and talk about all the things that they see as needed for improvement or might be wrong, to say, okay, well, you've been out and you've been around a lot of places. You're walking in and saying, look, guys, you're doing it right. There's always room to improve, right? But overall, from what you see from the way the town is handled, how it's operationally handled, how it's growing, the infrastructure, the way it's laid out, is a pretty good plan in comparison to what you've seen in other places, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a couple of things that really stuck out to me was the design aesthetic. Collierville has set the foundation in place with our development regulations and our design standards, and it is immediately apparent when you enter this community. And I've worked for communities that emphasize design and appearance out in Arizona, and I've worked for communities that didn't. And it matters. It absolutely matters. And so to those people that say we have room for improvement, absolutely. Everybody has room for improvement, and we're going to continue to look for ways to do that. But I want to tell you from my perspective, this town has the right tools in place, the right foundation. We're very strong financially. And we've got the right people and tools in place to continue that trajectory.
That's great news, and it's good to hear that from the outside coming in. And when you say this design aesthetic, just for those who might be new or listening or trying to dig into that a little bit, what you're talking about is the regulations that the town and maybe the planning commission and everyone that puts on new businesses that are coming in, that these ordinances that say a sign can't be this tall, and your landscaping has to be this, and your materials have to be that. That's what you're talking about, right? Is that's kind of laid out in a way that if you comply with it, will grow in a certain way and have a certain look and feel.
Exactly. It's those design regulations that the DRC and the Planning Commission and the board are expecting developers to adhere to ensure that our development remains timeless. And one piece of that, I think, now that we've experienced a lot of growth in the last few decades, and so we have some developments now that maybe 20 years old or so, we need to make sure that those continue to maintain the appearance that they were originally approved with, so we can continue to look good. I mean, that's the whole point, is to making sure that the quality of life and everything here is top notch.
Right. Yeah. So the things get built, and over time that you have to refresh them. Right. And so that's what you're talking about there. And there's certainly some parts of town, John and I have talked about that as well. There's certainly some parts of town that could do that could use some refreshing. And so, but you got, they're older, so that's somewhat expected. But I've heard, as you talk about these design regulations and that kind of stuff, every developer that I've ever talked to says that it's kind of it's hard to develop in Collierville because of those regulations and getting things approved and going back and forth and all that. But that's a positive, right? The more the town really stays on this and makes it harder for developers to get through that process. It might be painful in the beginning to get through it, but the end product, making them comply, ensures that the entirety of the town maintains its integrity. So it stands to reason that if everybody complies, even though it's painful, you're going to get more business at the end of the day, because as the town as a whole looks good and grows, your business is as well. So it's beneficial, although it might be a little bit difficult, and you might have some designer, some developers throwing hammers at their screens, but it's certainly it's worth it, right?
It is worth it. And every community I've ever worked in, developers have expressed it's hard to do business. And so Collierville is no different in that regard, but it does matter. And it's one of those things that the general public doesn't necessarily understand or need to understand what our regulations are, but they know when they come into Collierville and they see our development, it feels a certain way, it looks a certain way, and it's places that they want to go. And so it is important. And so I absolutely stand by it all and wouldn't do it any differently.
And Keith, I oftentimes tell developers and end users, the journey to the goal has some steps. There's a process, but once you're here and once you've developed and put your brand here, you're going to take advantage of all the demographics that we have, the infrastructure that's here, the safety and security of this community. So the reward at the end of this journey is you're going to be doing business in one of the premier communities in the region, and there's great value in all of that. So we emphasize that, keep coming, come with us. Here's how we operate. But in the end, it's going to be great for your brand.
Yeah, the buy-in might be higher, but that's the way it works, right? I mean, the higher the buy-in, the more quality the game, and that's the way it works. And and I don't mean a financial buy-in, although that could be, our real estate is costly and that type of stuff too. But the buy-in is kind of the work that you have to put forward to get in. But once you're in, then you're in a bigger game, and so it just kind of stands to reason, right?
Yeah, like any other investment, what you put into it is what you get out of it, and so. Absolutely agree.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. And along those same lines, when you talk about the regulations and things, Collierville has, we talk about a lot, I think it's a 2040 plan, and it's out there. People can look at it. But a while back, it's been some years now, everybody kind of got together and said, okay, this is going to set the zoning for the future. This is going to set what we want to look like. This is going to set what we think the population is going to be and how we're going to grow based off what that population is. Do you think that 2040 plan is still really, really valid and the right plan, or do you think that it needs some updates and it's time to kind of relook at it?
I think so. The plan was adopted in 2012, if my memory serves me correct. And so, with any long-term land use plan, it's important to check in periodically and make sure that you're still on the same trajectory that you set out on. And so, the plan is 10 years old now. And I think at some point in the near future, it'd be worthwhile to check in and make sure that are there any other factors in the community that would warrant us changing any of our land use strategies moving forward. And I think a piece of that we need to look at is, making sure that we have the infrastructure to support growth along the way. And so that's been more of an emphasis lately, making sure that our water and sewer and street infrastructure is adequate to handle the land use that we still have coming in this community. So I would be in favor in the next few years of revisiting the plan and just taking the pulse of the community and the board and making sure that we're right on the right track. And that doesn't have to be a complete overhaul of the plan, but just taking its temperature, making sure we are where we want to be, and do we need to pivot, make any adjustments along the way?
Gotcha. That makes sense. And there's some things that you can do, that you can look at it and say, okay, maybe we need to revisit this a little bit. And then there's other things that, maybe there was some zoning that came about because of it. And then an investor bought some land based off of what that zoning is. It's not easy to just go back and kind of change that zoning on them. So, because they made an investment, right? So some of the things are set out there, but some of the things could be updated, right? And I think that, one of the things, and I'll try to phrase this in a way that is not too much of a challenge to answer. But one of the things that gets challenged about the plan, and one of the things that gets challenged about the current zoning, always gets into the type of residential zoning that it has, and especially when you get into things like apartments. So, in your experience, what are the role, or what type of role could apartments play, and are apartments bad for towns of our size?
So I know apartments get a bad rap, and that's universal. That's not unique to Collierville. I experienced that in Arizona and Missouri as well. So it's pretty universal that there's a stigma attached to apartments and multifamily development. But I think it's misdirected. I think there is a place for that type of land use in our community. We have that type of land use, and I think it's served us well. And so I think we have to be mindful of our demographics moving forward, and that has to be part of the conversation to ensure that we have the housing to support young professionals that are working at the companies that John recruits to Collierville, such as IMC and Mueller and Helena Agra, and making sure that those individuals have a place to live. Empty nesters, single moms and dads, all are people. I've lived in apartments before. When I was a young city planner out in Arizona, I lived in an apartment, and that's what suited me best at that part of my life. And so I don't think we can discount it entirely. We still have a lot of properties in Collierville that have those entitlements, and I expect that we will see those come to fruition at some point. But I think the important thing is to make sure that we handle that development appropriately, and that we make sure that it's designed appropriately so that it blends into our community and develops and ages timelessly.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they have a role, and some of them, like you just mentioned, and in a plan, there's a percentage of of how many apartments you should have in equations, and people have thought through all that. And if you do it right, then they serve a need that the community has, just like other needs that a community would have, right? So it's all based on some level of data, and again, how you do it and how you develop it, and those regulations are going to play into it. But it's not like Collierville, is going to be putting out. I mean, some of these apartments you could probably pay a house note faster than you could pay some of this rent in the apartment. So, you know, we're talking about nice things here, but I know that's a hot topic. So I just kind of wanted to get your take on it in the community. I'm going to move to John and get in to find out what this flapjack is, but also give us an idea of economic development. But before I do that, is there anything else you wanted to add or anything that you wanted to put out there?
No, I just want to tell everyone how blessed I am to be here and thank everyone that's helped my adjustment period into Collierville go so well.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that. And feel free, as I'm talking to John, to jump in. We interrupt him all the time. He does fine with it. So, yeah. All right. What in the world is a flapjack?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, Keith. Flapjack is a pickleball term. Okay. And as I know, as a great pickleball player that you are, the first two shots have to bounce. And the third shot and beyond, you can hit the ball in the air. So the first two shots are called the flapjack. They've got to bounce. And then you can rally and all that. So I just thought I'd throw out the pickleball term because it was announced yesterday that a business called 901 Pickleball is coming to Carriage Crossing. It's going to be an indoor and outdoor for-fee membership-related pickleball facility. And it fits right into what the new owners of Carriage Crossing had talked about is experiential retail, businesses in retail and products that bring people to the center. And I'm not sure what the membership aspirations are for 901 Pickleball, but based on pickleball, I would imagine it's going to grow. And it's kind of cool to see this come into town. And I know we've got pickleball outlets around town, but this is the first, for-profit business, if you will, around pickleball. And if you read all the real estate magazines and retail magazines out there and what the trends are, this is one of the hottest trends out there. And I'm having a meeting later today with the Carriage Crossing owners and hopefully find out a little bit more about this product and what other things are bubbling up at Carriage Crossing.
Yeah, and that's a hot area, right? Everybody's kind of got their eye on what the new owners are going to do. But I've heard pickleball I don't know if it's true, but I've heard things saying it's the fastest growing sport in America right now. That it's like, it maybe in the world, it's like a huge growing. Is 901 Pickleball, is that founded just for this? Is this their first place, or do you know if they have other ones?
It is. It's a local entrepreneur, businessman who's got some background in restaurant and retail, as well as technology. And I think he's on the right track. I've seen some initial plans. It's going to be nice. And like with anything, we talk about multifamily or corporate headquarters or whatever. There's a market for it. So he's obviously done his due diligence before he invests in upgrades and finish out to the property and then builds some courts. He has done his research. We've met with him a couple times. So here it comes. And I think it's great news. And it's fun news. They talk about, what can we do? What is there to do in town? Well, there's a lot to do. And now we've got something else to do in the form of pickleball.
Yeah, I'll definitely go there and play. I love playing pickleball. I wasn't aware. I thought that the ball had to bounce all the time. And I've only just I've never played like in a formal. We had a pickleball during COVID. One of the first things we did was order a pickleball net and all that kind of stuff. And so my daughter and I played out in the driveway all the time. And so I'm a tennis player, used to be when I could move faster. So I pick it up pretty easy, but I didn't know that about the rules that you could. I thought it always had to bounce. I didn't know you could run up and hit a volley like that.
Yeah, it has to bounce on the first two shots. And then supposedly after the first two, the players will yell OPA, O-P-A, which I thought was maybe a Greek party term, but evidently they yell OPA, which means, okay, now you can hit it on the fly. So just hang around with me, Keith. I will teach you about pickleball as we go forward. Okay.
Nice, man. Nice. I think one of the things that I was trying to do when I played pickleball is I was trying to figure out how to do it with both hands. So I didn't have to hit a backhand. So because the court's small, so I'll just throw the racket to the other hand and try to hit left-handed, right-handed to see if I could do it. That's going to be my secret advantage is I'm going to be able to do it with both hands. But you say this is a local developer. Is it a local Collierville developer or like a local Memphis developer?
It's a Collierville resident who works in Memphis, and it's cool. And we talk about, people investing in Collierville. We talk about that all the time. Here comes it seems like Oregon and FedEx and all those guys, Mueller, get all the headlines and all the chit chats around. But it's nice to see, the entrepreneurial investment and what I would call the smaller investments in our community, because there's quite a few of those as well. In fact, I was talking just the other day, there's some vacated buildings, old houses, if you will, just east of Landers Ford on Poplar, the old West Cancer Clinic buildings there. Mm-hmm. They have been acquired by a ag chemical company out of Tulsa, Oklahoma called Adjuvants, and they're moving their one of their sales offices to those buildings, and they've invested over $1.5 million in refurbishing those buildings, and they're bringing 15 people with average salaries of $150,000 to town. So you don't hear about that, but that's part of this economy we've got going, where people are making big investments and meaningful investments like Adjuvants. And then, Keith, the old Baloo wedding dress facility down at the gateway to Town Hall has been acquired. The Memphis investors that bought that are spending $1.3 million to acquire that facility. They're going to refurbish it and repurpose it and create new retail space there. So there's a lot going on around right now, big and small and in between, that is pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear it, especially the local type stuff. I mean, if you've got these bigger businesses, and they're very important, and you need them, and we've relied on them several times. But if you take the collective of the local businesses as well, it might be the biggest business in the city. If you took them all collectively and said, okay, what does our local represent? Well, that's going to be the biggest one segment that you would have. And so it's cool, and it's cool to see the Carriage Crossing people that are coming in town. And one of the first things that we're talking about announcing is something with a local resident that is starting. So give you an indication of who these guys are, and what they're trying to do in that area. And like you said, others are coming in too. So that's a cool thing to see reinvestment local. Where before we leave the pickleball stuff, where is it going in Carriage Crossing? Do you know? Do
you know where Milano's Pizza is in Carriage Crossing? It's going to be right next door to that, in that vacated space, and then they're hoping to create the outdoor courts next to that. There's a little field there right across the parking lot from the sporting goods store, the garment store. So right in that zone right there, which would be highly visible from the road. And once again, a part of the center that is going to be bringing a lot of people to the center. And I guarantee you, the restaurants will be happy and the retailers will be happy to know that all these people will be coming to that space on a daily basis. So it all works for the better, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, if I've got a pizza place, or I'm some of that stuff, I mean, I'm happy to see that traffic coming over there. I mean, anything that's going to pull people in as a destination. So what secrets can you tell us?
Well, one thing I did want to touch on the 2040 plan, and Molly was talking about, the look and the feel and the strategy and the process and what it all means. One of the things that I think people forget sometimes is the value of these businesses in our community and what they bring to our community. And sometimes people question, what's going there and why aren't they coming here and who's coming? But the people that are coming are making big investments, and it's important for our community to continue to thrive by having all these different types of investments. And I've heard from so many people that are looking at our community how well organized it is and how well managed it is, and the look, what Molly alluded to earlier. The guys that are buying or have bought Carriage Crossing, one of the first things they said was, this is a beautiful town, and we scout new locations all across the country. This is one of the nicest communities we've ever seen. So when you hear somebody other than your grandma or your brother-in-law tell you your kid's cute, it's nice to hear an outsider talk about Collierville like that. So they're impressed with it, and they're investing here, $25 million. So we're doing something right, because people are continuing to want to invest here and grow their brands here. And, we've talked about Publix before, and I think Publix will be back. One of the things that they said, they said the windshield tour, which means, driving around the town, looking at what's here. Don't
do that with your phone held up, by the way. You'll
that's right. You get a phone call.
Right, so don't do that. Right.
But they said Collierville drives as better as any town we've ever seen. And they've been to a lot of towns. So when you hear outsiders talk like that, when you hear insiders talk like that, you know we're doing something right. And that will continue. And I've been impressed with the investments, big and small, that are coming our way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get some of the same thing on a smaller scale, but when I have relatives and my wife's family, they come to visit, they say that too, that the town is nice. I mean, they even say like you can drive around town and just the cars that are on the road, just the type of cars that you have, know that you're in a nice community. You know you're in a nice area. But people don't think about it. And I think another piece of it is that you look at Collierville and you think about it as expensive. But if you find a town that is similar to Collierville in terms of safety stats, what all the town has, and the actual cost of living compared to what if you were to take this town and pick it up and plant it outside of a lot of other cities, the cost of living is ridiculously low by comparison for what we have here and what you're getting. So we I don't know how you say that, but you know we hit above our means, or I don't know the right term.
Box above our weight.
Box above our weight. There you go. Yeah. So we box above our weight. And I think that's a big deal, and outsiders are coming in and affirming that as well.
Well, and not only are we getting a lot of migration here from citizens who want to live here because it's safe and they've got great schools and the neighborhoods and the churches and the lifestyle, but corporations are doing the same thing. I mean, not only are residents coming here, but corporations are coming here and businesses are coming here because it's a place that people want to be, because it's a good community, and I'm bullish. It's going to continue. And you know how I love stats and numbers, Keith, that sometimes when you're driving around and looking around, you might see something or think something that might not be 100% accurate. I hear oftentimes that there's so much retail vacancy in town, and there is retail vacancy in town. Every city has retail vacancy.
Right. And
I had somebody the other day tell me it's like 25 to 50% vacant. I was like, I don't think it's that much. And I got some data a couple of days ago from a friend in the commercial real estate side. And I said to her, I go, can you look up what our vacancy number is right now? She says 5.6%. Our retail vacancy percentage in this town is less than 6%, down 8% from a year ago. So we were at 7, we're now at 6, and that's pretty low. Certain centers have higher vacancies, which drives that number. But for us to have some high vacancies at certain centers and for our overall vacancy to be less than 6 tells me that we're doing pretty well. And the retail market, the commercial market here is pretty healthy.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. It really is. And just to start off with the person that was telling you first, between 25 and 50%, there's a massive difference in between 25 and 50%. Just to put that out there. But even getting down to 6%. And if you look at what's happening at Carriage Crossing and that being revitalized, and knowing that those numbers are going to change for that one center is probably going to knock us down 2 more points. Yes. And so that's a big deal. That sounds like a really good number to me.
And then part of that as well is the sales tax revenues. We just got some updated sales tax numbers a couple of days ago, and rolling calendar, 12-month rolling year to date this year versus year to date last year, we're up 6.5%, and that's a testament to the businesses we have in town. That's a testament to who is here shopping and involved in our economy, and to have sales tax revenues up almost 7% year over year in what sometimes feels like a tough economy is pretty impressive as well. So, I like having the data. I like having the stats because it tells a different story than maybe what's out there anecdotally.
Sure. Yeah. And is that the kind of that 6% number of retail vacancies? Is that consistent with what you've seen in other towns, Molly? And or do you know what
I think that's low. I mean, I think that is a really good place to be. I know where I came from previously had a higher vacancy rate than that. And so Collierville should be proud where we're sitting right now. It's a good place to be.
Yeah, it seems like a low number to me, for sure.
Well, when you talk about retail health, I mean, think about this right now. You got PetSmart's building a facility, Pop Shelf. Here comes Chipotle. Here comes Jersey Mike's. Stack's just opened up their new place at Houston Levy and Poplar, the 2 retail buildings in Schilling, 12,000 square feet. Here comes SOB, Crumble Cookie, and they just recently announced, and we haven't talked about this on the show because it just happened, Rotolo's, R-O-T-O-L-O, Rotolo's.
Yeah.
Italian, it's kind of a pizza place, but it's really kind of a combination between Carrabba's and Mellow Mushroom. They've got a great bar, a variety of menus other than just pizza. It's a great brand. It's a Southern brand out of Baton Rouge. They're coming to that new retail there in Schilling. It'll be a great addition to town. It's at the center of town. And that, talk about activity, that whole water tower district's unfolding to include a new Marriott Towns Place Hotel. So things are happening and continuing to happen. And it's getting back to people are investing in our community.
Yeah, and even the square area, historic district with Gorsani's coming in there as well. So, and all of this in the face of, oh, we're going into a recession nationally, and all that, investment is down and dollars borrowed are up, and all that kind of stuff. But Collierville, once again, is kind of bucking the trend a little bit there. So, it sounds like, and I know I've heard this criticism before of me and of this show, that that we're kind of rah Collierville and always are trying to build up Collierville. But the facts are what the facts are, right? And when you get down into the minutia of certain issues, sure, there's things you're going to find that's wrong with the town. There's things that you're going to wish that the town did better. But if you raise it up in altitude, like we're doing here on this show, and we'll get down in the trenches with you, maybe not in this episode, but we'll get down in the trenches with you. You put some individual things about Collierville in that chat and put questions out to us, we'll address them. But at the highest altitude, if you can't sit back and recognize where you are, where you live, the benefits of where you live, and how well Collierville is doing and how well we're doing comparatively to other towns, then you're really missing the boat. You're missing the picture, right? Because it's not that we want to be rah Collierville. We are, but at the same time, it's just what's happening. And so it's hard not to acknowledge.
It's hard not to be rah Collierville. I mean, I try to look for negative things to talk about, but there's so much good going on here, and every day something new, every month something comes to fruition. And then, like I said, the Carriage Crossing guys from Edwards Realty out of Chicago, that's what they do. They revitalize and repurpose centers, and they're impressed. Publix, I mean, you can't get. That's one of the best retailers in the country talking positively about how this town's organized. And, I even had a guy through here the other day from Dallas, and he goes, boy, you guys sure like your trees here. I go, yeah, we do. We sure like our trees, and they help make for a beautiful community. We're not going to chop them all down to build something. So, yeah, there is an aesthetic and a process and a theory, whatever you want to call it here, and it seems to be working, folks. So yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, how can you not like trees, right? I mean, if you can develop and you can still maintain some of the ag that's around and all of that. I mean, that's one thing I hate about like new neighborhoods is that the developers go down and just wipe out all the trees, and it's easier to develop, but because you don't have to develop around them. But that's a big thing. You're saying a small thing like you guys like your trees, but that's a real deal, right? I mean, to be able to develop around trees and not knock them all down. In Dallas, maybe if you had more trees, they produce more oxygen, and the Cowboys would win something.
Hey,
right? So maybe we should talk about that.
Well, and I'm from Dallas, and I love Dallas, but Dallas is kind of a concrete jungle. I mean, there's a lot of steel and glass and concrete everywhere. There are trees, but it's different. So I think Collierville's done a good job. In fact, we just hired, Molly can probably touch on this better than I. We just hired a horticulturist. You say that 5 times fast.
No doubt.
To work. Molly, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so not too long ago, we brought on Elizabeth Doss, who's a horticulturist, and she came to us, I think, from the University of Memphis. And so she's been working to pull out a lot of the dead bushes that, everybody we lost during the freeze, like most people did this winter. But she is paying attention to our town properties and those landscape medians and whatnot to make sure that we, again, have that aesthetic in those trees and those things, again, that people don't really think about too often. They don't recognize that that's necessarily the thing that's making something feel better or a place that you want to go, but that's what Elizabeth's focus is, and she's doing a tremendous job. So we're very fortunate to have her on board.
Yeah, that's cool. And I like the way you put that, because you don't think about little things like that. But when you drive through from one town to another, you notice it. I notice it probably because I'm kind of into it a little bit, into the business. But you can even be driving, down Poplar, and when you've left one town and entered another town, just because the way the medians are cut. I mean, so it is a feeling once you get in. You don't pick up on exactly what it is, but and so that part of it is a big deal. So that's cool.
It's good. It's the landscaping, it's the signage, it's the design, it's how it's maintained, is all a part of that feeling. And like you said, you can't pinpoint exactly what it is, but when you're in a place that feels good, that you're comfortable and you feel safe in, and that's what Collierville is all about.
Well, and Keith, one thing I would say about all that, Slim Chickens built their restaurant right there at the gateway to the historic district. And there were certain things that we wanted them to do to be a good partner in this community with their design and their landscaping, et cetera. And they didn't really fight that. They said, here we go, because we know the value of being in this community. Well, fast forward, they they've got like 150 restaurants. The records are all held by the Collierville store, which had the most first day sales, most first week sales, most first month sales. They killed it and continue to kill it. And they knew, I'm coming here. Here's what I need to do to be here. And I know that if I'm here, I'm going to be successful. And they're the perfect story about what it takes to be successful in this community. And that's our friends at Slim Chickens.
And I see a lot of Slim Chickens. I go to Arkansas a lot, and I see a lot of Slim Chickens. There's not many that look like the one in Collierville, if any, right? And so that's a good example of how you have to adapt and change and meet our regulations. But then once you do, like you said, okay, sales are also meeting those expectations, right?
Exactly, right.
Yeah. So we're out of time, but I wanted to talk about some of in the budget. There's a lot earmarked, I think, for digital security, that type of stuff. Maybe we can get into that some in another episode. And Maureen's talked about it, but I appreciate you coming on, Molly, and John, of course, as usual. I know that it must be hot where you are with the frog towel. And good luck with the meeting this afternoon with Carriage Crossing people. But I appreciate all you guys joining us, and appreciate you guys being with us as well.
Thank you, Keith. It was great to be here.
Yeah,
thanks,
absolutely.
Keith.
And I'll kind of end back with our sponsor, First National Bank and Trust. If you've learned anything today, if you learned something like Collierville has only a 6% vacancy rate, and what our regulations are, and that we're providing you information on this show that you're probably not going to find anywhere else, one of the reasons is because sponsors like First National Bank and Trust support us, and they allow us to do that. They allow us to promote this video. They allow us the funds to promote this video out on social media, so more people can hear actually what's going on. So appreciate all of our sponsors, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.